Good morning, Devashish.
Good morning, sir. The net slow ଅଛି ଆଜି।
କୋଉ ପେଜ ଯାଏଁ ଯାଇଥିଲା?
ସାର୍ ନୂଆ ଚେପ୍ଟର 6 ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେବ 6।
Using dynamic SQL. After completing this lesson, you should be able to do the following. Describe the execution of a flow of SQL statements. Builds and execute SQL statement dynamically using native dynamic SQL DNS NDS that. Identify the situation when you must use the DBMS underscore SQL package instead of NDS to build and execute the SQL statement dynamically. Using native dynamic SQL, all SQL statement go through some or all the following stages, that is pass, bind, execute, and fetch. Some stage may not be relevant for all statement. The fetch phase is applicable to queries. For embedded SQL statements such as select DML, merge, commit, save point, and rollback, the pass and bind phases are done at a compile time. For dynamic SQL statement, all phases are performed at runtime, right? All SQL statements have go through the various stages. However, some stages may not be relevant for all statement. The following are the key stages. Pass. Every SQL statement must be passed. Passing the statement includes the checking the statement syntax and validating the statement, ensuring that all the reference to object are corrected and that the relevant privilege to this object exit. Bind. After passing the Oracle server may need value from or for any bind variable in the statement. The process of obtaining these values is called a binding variable. This stage may be skipped if the statement does not contain and bind variables. Execute. At this time, the Oracle server has all necessarily information and resource, and the statement is executed for non-query statement. This is the last phase. Fetch. In this phase stage, which is applicable to query, the rows are selected and ordered if requested by the query, and each successive fetches relatives another row of the result until the the last row has been fetched, right? Working of dynamic SQL. Use dynamic SQL to create a SQL statement whose structure may change during runtime. Dynamic SQL is constructed and stored as a character string, string variable, or string expression within the application. In a SQL statement with varying column data for the or different condition with or without placeholder, that is bind variable. Enable DDL, DCL, or session control statement to be written and execute for PLSQL. Is executed with native dynamic SQL statement or the DBMS underscore SQL package. The embedded SQL statement available in PLSQL are limited to select, insert, update, delete, merge, commit, and roll back, all which are passed at compile time. That is, they have fixed structure. You need to use dynamic SQL functionality if you are required, right? तो मोर जो इन सिलेक्ट हो, इंसर्ट हो, अपडेट हो, डिलीट हो, मर्ज हो, एगुड़ा सब होची मोर कंपाइल टाइम हला कंपाइल कले ही आसे. डायनेमिक स्ट्रक्चर जदि तुमको दरकार हुए ताले द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ ए एसक्यूएल स्टेटमेंट टू बी अल्टर्ड एट रन टाइम. Assess the data definition language statement and other SQL functionality in the PLSQL. To perform these kinds of tasks, PLSQL you must construct SQL statement dynamically in character string and execute them using either of the following. Native dynamic SQL statement with execute immediate. the dbms underscore SQL package. The process of using SQL statements that are not embedded in your source program and are constructed in string and execute at runtime is known as dynamic SQL. The SQL statements are created dynamically at runtime and can access and use PL/SQL variable. For example, you create a procedure that uses dynamic SQL to operate on a table whose name is not known until the runtime or execute a DDL statement such as create table and data control statements such as grant table or session control statements such as alter session, right? Use dynamic SQL when the full text of dynamic SQL statement is unknown until runtime. Therefore, its syntax is checked at runtime rather than the compile time. Use dynamic SQL when one of the following items is unknown at pre-compile time. Text of the SQL statement such as command, clauses, and so on. The number and data types of host variable. Reference to database objects such as tables, columns, sequence, usernames, and views. Use dynamic SQL to make your PL/SQL programs are general and flexible, right? In PL/SQL, you need to dynamic SQL to execute the following SQL statement where the full text is known at compile time, such as a select statement that includes an identifier that is unknown at compile time, such as a table name, right? A where clause in which the column's name is unknown at compile time. Note that for additional information about dynamic SQL, see the following resources: Pro, C and C++ program guide 11G, document guide, lesson 13, Oracle Dynamic SQL, covers the 4 available methods that you can use to define dynamic SQL statement. It briefly describes the capabilities and limitation of each method and then offers the guidelines for choosing the right method. Later section in the same guide, you how to use the method and include the example program that you can study. Lesson 15, Oracle Dynamic SQL Method 4 contains very details information about the method 4 when the definition dynamic SQL statement. The Oracle PL/SQL programming book by Stephen Fursten and Bill Privy, lesson 16, Dynamic SQL and Dynamic PL/SQL contains additional information about the dynamic SQL, right? This session mane ei reference to am pai jibo pura briefly description. Native Dynamic SQL provide native support for Dynamic SQL directly in the PL/SQL language. Provides the ability to execute SQL statement whose structure is known as until execution time. Just a second. If the dynamic SQL statement is a select statement that returns multiple rows, NDS gives you the following choices. Use the execute immediate statement with the block collect into clause. Use the open for fetched and close statement. The Oracle Database 11G NDA supports statement larger than 32 KB by accepting a club argument, right? No. So native dynamic SQL provides the ability of dynamically execute SQL statement whose structure is constructed at execution time. The following statement have been added or extended in PL/SQL support native dynamic SQL. Execute immediate prepares a statement, executes it, return variable, and then deallocated resource. Open for prepares and executes a statement using the cursor variable. Fetched retrieves the result of an open statement by using the cursor variable. Close the cursor by used by the cursor variable and deallocated resource. You can use bind variable in the dynamic parameters in the execute immediate and open statement. Native dynamic SQL includes the following capabilities, that is define a dynamic SQL statement, handle in out and out bind variable that are bound by position, not by name. Right. Using the execute immediate statement, the use the execute immediate statement for NDS or PLSQL anonymous block. Execute immediate dynamic string into define variable, define variables using in out or in देखिए use करो bind argument, right? Into is used for single row queries and specifies the variable or record into which columns value are retrieved. Using is used to hold all bind argument. The default parameter made is in. The executable immediate statement can be used to execute SQL statement or PLSQL anonymous block. The syntactically element include the following. Dynamic string is a string expression that represent a dynamic SQL statement without terminator or PLSQL block with terminator. Define variable is a PLSQL variable that store the select statement values. So record is a user-defined percentile row type record that store a selected row. Bind argument is an expression whose value is passed to the dynamic SQL statement or PLSQL block. The into clause specifies the variable or record into which column values are retrieved. It is used only for single row queries. For each value retrieved by the query, there must be a corresponding type compatible variable or field into the into clause. The using clause holds all bind argument. The default parameter mode is in. You can use numeric character and string. You can use numeric character and string literal and as bind argument, but you cannot use Boolean literal, true, false, and null. Note that use open for fetch and close for a multiple queries. The syntax shown in the slide is not complete because support exists for block processing operation, which is a topic that is not covered in this course. Available method for using NDS देखो. Method 1, non-query without host variable. NDS SQL statement will be used to execute the immediate without using and into clause. Method 2, non-query with known number of input host variable. The NDS SQL statement execute the immediate with a using clause. Method 3, query with known number of select list item and input host variable. The NDS SQL statement execute the immediate with using and into clause. Method 4, unknown query with unknown number of selected list item and or input host variable, that is use DBMS SQL package, right? Available method for using NDS. The 4 available method for NDS that are listed in the slide are increasingly general. That is method 2 encompass method 1. Method 3 is encompass to method 1 and method 2. Method 4 encompass with method 1, 2 and 3. However, each method is most useful for handling a certain kind of SQL statement as follows. Method 1, this is method let your program accept a build dynamic SQL statement and then immediately execute it using the execute immediate command. The SQL statement must not be query and must not contain any placeholder for input host variable. For example, the following host string qualify. Delete from employees where department number equal to 20. Grant select on employees to Scott. With method 1, the SQL statement is passed every time it is executed. Note that, for example, often queries include data definition language DDL statement, database insert or deletes. The term select list item include column name and expressions such as SQL whole into 1.10 for the maximum of salary, right? Method 2, this method lets your program accept or build a dynamic SQL statement and the process it using the prepare and execute command. The SQL statement must not be query. The number of placeholder for input host variable and the data type of the input host variable must be known that compile time. For example, the following host string fall into this category. Insert into employee, first name, last name, job ID, values, whose employee first name, employee last name, job ID. Delete from employees where employee ID equal to employee number, right? जो valid ID दिया है वो तारा row टाको से delete कर. With method 2, the SQL statement is passed just once, but can be executed many times with different values. For the host variable, SQL data definition statements such as create and grant are executed when they are prepared. The method 3, this method lets your program accept or build a dynamic query and then process it using the prepare command with the declare, open, fetch and close cursor command. The number of select list item, the number of placeholder for input host variable, and the data type of the input host variable must be known at pre-compile time. For example, the following host variable string qualified. Select department ID, minimum salary, maximum salary, from employees, group by department ID. Select last name employee ID from employees where department ID equal to department number. The method 4, the program accept or build dynamic SQL statement and then process it using descriptor. A descriptor is an area of memory used by your program and Oracle to hold a complete description of a variable in a dynamic SQL statement. The number of select list item, number of placeholder into input host variable, and the data type of the input host variable can be unknown until runtime. For example, the following host string fall into this category. That is insert into employees, unknown values, then unknown, right? तापरे तमरा आसो unknown माने तम रन टाइम रे सेटा मागिबो सेटा बुझला. Select unknown from employees where department ID equal to 20. The method 4 is required for dynamic SQL statement that contains a unknown number of selected list item or input host variable. With this method, you use the DBMS underscore SQL package, which is covered later in this lesson. The situation that required using method 4 are rare, right? The dynamic SQL with DDL statement example, let me call it. Sarila.